Olá, boa tarde a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos. Eu estou muito feliz em anunciar a abertura oficial da parceria neste projeto entre a Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas, a Reitoria Digital da Universidade Federal de Goiás, com o Departamento de Música da Mississippi State University, sob comando da doutora Rosângela Yazbek-Seba. Estou muito honrada em poder receber duas personalidades muito importantes do mundo do piano, Dubal e Stanley Waldoff. Antes de começar o programa, eu gostaria de dedicar esse programa a um músico muito querido, uma pessoa excepcional que se foi hoje pela Covid-19, Manassés Aragão. Hoje ele completaria 40 anos de idade, o programa é dedicado a ele. Infelizmente, esse primeiro programa, por termos dois convidados, ele não terá uma tradução simultânea. Mas nos próximos programas, uma vez por mês, a doutora Rosângela Seba fará a entrevista em inglês e fará a entrevista em simultâneo. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos. I am very happy to announce the official opening of the partnership of this project between the School of Music and Performing Arts and Digital Department of Federal University of Goiás with the Department of Music of Mississippi State University under the coordinator of Dr. Rosângela Yazbek-Seba. I am very excited to welcome two very important personalities from the piano world, Dubal and Stanley Waldoff. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos, Dr. Rosângela Yazbek-Seba.
Boa tarde a todos do Brasil, de Portugal, and good afternoon to people in the United States. It is a pleasure to be with two wonderful musicians, Dubal and Stanley Waldoff, both of whom I had lessons in classes. David, I had one semester of piano literature classes at Juilliard, and Stanley was my major professor during my PhD. So I would like to welcome them to the screen, Dubal and Stanley Waldoff.
Thanks so much, Rosanna.
Thank you.
It is very exciting to have you guys here, and it's quite humbling to talk to such wonderful musicians and pianists. I would like to just show a little bit, and again.
Stanley Waldoff, and we're going to be hearing 7 pieces from 3 recordings that he brought with him. And we're going to begin, Stan, with, we said that we exhumed the ghosts, that we like doing that. And you have a performance of At the Spring by a man by the name of Rafael Yosefi. Who was he?
Well, he was one of the giants of the 19th century, a great pianist, and obviously people have seen that he's made many. He was the editor of many much music of the 19th century.
Chopin editions.
Absolutely. I'm not fond of his editions, but I am fond of this piece. It's one of the really fun pieces that I've ever played, and horrendously difficult.
Well, we're going to hear it. Stanley Waldoff, my guest today, in Rafael Yosefi's At the Spring.
Unfortunately, we are going to have to stop this wonderful performance, but this is David introducing Stanley in one of his programs. And
I sound like Martha Argerich on steroids.
I just would like to go over all the recordings, which are one of my favorites. We have here 4 recordings that you guys share. The first one is Music of the Romantic Pianist Composers. And then we have The Piano in America. And we have Invitation to the Waltz. Which one is the double CD? Is the Invitation, right?
Yes.
No, the
No. The
virtuoso pianist.
Yeah.
Okay, and I would like, first of all, to start the conversation by asking, how did you guys meet? How was this partnership, the start of this partnership?
Well, first of all, I would like to say I haven't seen Stanley in person in a long time, so this technology is very good, and he looks wonderful, and it's a great pleasure to be with you, Rosangela, and I think Stanley would be able to tell you even better than I could and how we actually met. And it was a long time ago. We won't even say when, very distant, but we have known each other every minute of that time afterward. So when was it, Stan, that you encountered me?
It was 60 years ago when a friend of mine, Saul Braverman, and I walked into the student lounge at Juilliard, and we saw this figure sitting with a rather sullen look in a chair. And I said, I think we should meet this man. And it turned out, we went over, and it turned out to be David. And the interesting thing is that David's teacher, as a young boy, had been to Juilliard with me the year before and asked me to look out for David. And so when I said I'm a friend of Jimmy Stream, and David said, oh my goodness, I studied with him and blah, blah, blah. And that's how the relationship began.
Well,
Wow.
1959, as a matter of fact.
You know, I'm not happy with what the year is, but you don't need to discuss years, my friend. But I'll never forget that either. And you know, it was one of those moments that last. I mean, what can you say? Yeah, we're still here together.
Yeah, and I know that you guys also were roommates and went through all the ins and outs of being in school together.
Right.
Let's talk about Juilliard and the professors that you guys had, the piano teachers that you guys had. I know that Stanley Waldoff studied with Martin Cannon, who is a pupil of Rosina, and David Dubal studied with Adele Marcus, pupil of Joseph. Both are the beginning of the Russian pianism in the United States. So it doesn't matter who will start first, but you guys can talk about your experience with those professors, because I think everybody would enjoy getting to know more about what you learn beyond the piano.
Well, let me start, because the two most important teachers in my life were a Hungarian pianist named István Nádas, great pianist, whom I studied with from the age of 14 to 17. And I always said to him, and I said to David, and I believe I said to Rosangela too, I owe him everything. And my most important teacher after that was Martin Cannon, who was Rosina Levin's assistant from the age of 27. And he died this past year, I guess. And he became regular faculty when she died herself at the age of 90 something. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
96, think of it.
Yeah, 96. I mean, she spanned a whole century almost.
Mm-hmm.
So those were my two most important teachers, and the others at Juilliard, I adored Vinnie Persichetti. He was a real interesting man and a real inspiration for anybody who came into contact with him. And, so it goes. There were a couple of academic teachers I liked a lot. And David, why don't you talk about your feelings there?
Well, Juilliard, of course, is Juilliard, and it's a great name, and it remains that. And when I got there, I was, I would say I didn't know anyone, and I think that my early training kept me behind because all I had was the piano, and so all of these other classes I was really not good at, and I had to struggle. But in my first of all, I didn't start the piano until about 9 years old. And that's a setback because you really should have those reflexes going by 5 or 6. But, you know, I loved it so much, and nothing could stop me from learning. I had a couple of teachers that were not very good. And then when James Stream, who we just talked about, so to speak, a friend of my parents, and going to Juilliard, I attached myself to him. He said, study with me. And I studied with him in the summers. And then he took me to a woman that's was so fascinating, and I had no technique at all. And she was so scary to me. She was about 6'1", maybe no more than 100 pounds. Madame Frances Courtoyer. She had come from one of the great families of Cleveland, and she had a mansion. And everyone in Ohio, they would come from Dayton or Cincinnati, whatever. Eunice Potus was her, finest student, and she had these recitals at home, and we all played in rank. The best one was last, and so I was the worst one for a little while, but I kept moving up, and she was incredible. I should have stayed on with her, but I didn't have any ability to communicate with her. She was a German academic, pedantic woman. Her husband was 30 years older than her when she married, and guess who he studied with in Rome? And that was Franz Liszt. So that alone, made me very, oh my goodness, my teacher's husband studied with Liszt. Oh, and Liszt studied with Czerny. And you said something interesting. I owe Nadaj everything. And when Liszt dedicated his Transcendental Etudes, he dedicated them to the teacher of his youth, who he was the only teacher that he ever had as a professional piano teacher, 18 months, and that was it. And they whisked him off through every, moment in Europe that he could play wherever he could. But on the title page, it says, to Karl Czerny, and I owe him everything. So it's a beautiful phrase. And that is a phrase that many, many people in the world of the piano, I think Stanley would surely agree, would cherish, because we all have these mentors or these people. Now, by 34 years at Juilliard, I'm always so happy when I know that someone from Australia or Germany or wherever it is. It's amazing. Not a week goes by that I don't have a communication from one of the people that I had made a great impression on. So that's it. At Juilliard, I had studied with Lonnie Epstein, and also Stanley. Don't leave out a really great name of the piano, which was Beveridge Webster.
Beveridge Webster, yes.
First, I studied with Lonnie Epstein, but again, she was too old for me. I couldn't communicate with her, and but I had a good time. Stanley and I, we had a riotous time living together in an apartment which was on 116th Street, and I would say that half of New York came to see us every night. How come? I have no idea.
Rosanna, let me say this about David, because in truth, he's a very modest person, although one wouldn't realize that talking with him. Anyway, when I was at Juilliard, we were walking down the street one morning, very early, about 8 o'clock. And David, who was taking a course at Juilliard in art history, said, "Oh my goodness, I'm supposed to lecture this morning." I said, "Lecture? Lecture for what?" He said, "Well, the teacher, whose name was, I think I'm correct, Claude Marx."
Yes.
Who was a lecturer at the Museum of Modern Art.
The Metropolitan, yes.
Metropolitan. He had asked David, who was then 18 or 19, to take over a class for him. and do a lecture. And he said to me, he said, I haven't thought about it. I don't know what to do. What should I do? And I said, well, why don't you lecture about Michelangelo? And you said, oh, okay. And so we went to class. I was not in the class, but I went that morning. And for 1 hour, this gentleman in front of me, my dear friend, kept everybody mesmerized with his knowledge of Michelangelo and his overall knowledge of painting. David knows as much about painting as he does about the piano, and that, my friends, is saying a lot. Anyway, I said once in an article that I wrote, or a book that I wrote, I never again looked at my friend the same way.
Oh, how eloquent, Stanley! And you brought back a real wonderful moment. And Claude Marx was a wonderful man. And soon as he found out that I did very well, he decided to start letting me do them every week and then leave because he didn't care to do it, or he had a lecture. So, I think even Tom Schumacher was in a class once, a great piano friend of ours. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And David, can you talk about your new book, the paintings that you have just published? Can you show the book? I ordered, but I didn't receive it yet.
Well, you will receive it, and I hope I can, sign it one of these days. I want to show it to you because it's called Selected Paintings and Drawings of David Dubal, and there's about 160 works in different media, and also a couple of articles. One of them being by myself on Leonardo Da Vinci, who I consider like the fountainhead or the Lord of men, I would call him. And also in my own way, my own early years with painting. I don't even discuss music at all. Also, there was at 16 years old, and you've never seen this, Stanley, except when you saw the book. This is a man that was very inspiring to me, talking about teachers. We all need good teachers. If we don't have them, oh God, we're gonna be in hell. But this man was my art teacher, and his name was Thompson Leonard, and it's a shame that he died this year, and he never got a chance to see this because he wouldn't even have remembered it. He did this by looking at me within a second. I guess I had already had some knowledge there that I was a pianist, because here it is. And I found it and I said, I've got to pay my homage, because to pay respects to the people that you have had, as you have with Nadaj and so forth, to pay respects is absolutely important. One of my teachers, Arthur Lesser, I've never stopped paying respects to him. I used to give him an anniversary concert on WNCN every year and so forth. But here is the 16-year-old David with a little mustache still. You see it?
Oh, yes.
You see the piano?
Yes.
He did this with a virtuosity that was fantastic. And somehow I kept it. And there it is. It's now inside this book. And by the way, all the people in Portugal, because I've been in Portugal, I've played the Horwitz piano in Sao Paulo in my show there, with the Horwitz piano there, and then in Lisbon and in Oporto, and it's a great, lovely country, both of them. So I've always felt that I should learn more than obrigado, but that's it. And you can buy the book, by the way, and I really hope everyone in Portugal and Brazil does. And it's simple to get, just the paintings and drawings of David Dubal, and just hit Amazon.com. And sometimes it comes in 2 days, Rosangela, anywhere. So
well, I hope so. And talking about that, you have a new program that you are after retiring from Juilliard, so many years teaching at Juilliard, you are now with a program. Can you talk about that? They can also attend online. anybody around the world can attend online because it's broadcast via Zoom, right?
Yeah, it's called Piano Evenings with David Dubal, and you could get it on the what do you call it? The computer.
Facebook.
Yes, it's everywhere that way. But you can click on to pianoevenings.com, and it tells you everything about the piece, the program, and it's absolutely wonderful for young pianists because they come from everywhere, and of course with this damn pandemic, they come and play with their masks sometimes, and they show us their chart that they're negative, things like that. But there's no audience, and there used to be, and I hope we have a live audience again in September, and it will go on. It's I think it's important, and the young pianists, they get a small honorarium, things like that, because it's so essential to have someone paid something. You remember when I was at Mississippi and I did a portrait of a girl, do you remember?
Yes.
And she said, "Oh, I want that," you know? I said, "I never give away anything." Even though it was her.
Talking about the radio programs and the piano literature classes that you taught at Juilliard, Stanley, can you talk about what happened in between the two of you that ended up that David is now with the radio program?
Well, that's an interesting story too. There was this is going to sound crazy. There was a dental hygienist that lived in my building, and one of her clients was a man named Stan Gurel, who ran a radio station in New York that was not very well known, but played only classical music, called WNCN. And I think he was looking for a program director. And he called me on the phone, and I was in the midst of getting my doctorate. And so I said, I can't do it, but I have somebody better than I. And he said, really? I said, yes. His name is David Dubal. He's a friend of mine, and he knows more than I know about the piano literature. And you'll be very pleased, and you'll be very happy that I recommended him. And so I called David and I said, be prepared to talk to this man about this job. And David's first comment was, can I do it from home? He didn't get out on the streets of those days.
I never left during those years.
For 3 years, he never left his house. And once somebody told his brother, I saw David on the street in New York, and his brother said, Richard said, that's not possible. Why not? Because he never goes out of the apartment.
Well, and because of Stanley's recommendation, I got this job that lasted 20 years, and which not only did I do well, I made the station as important in New York as a commercial station as WQXR. And it was a legendary station by the time I got done with it. And I must tell you, I worked so hard, Rosangela, and Stanley knows how hard I worked. It was every hour of every day, 168 hours a week that I programmed personally. It was a very poor station, and it did better and better. Stan Gurel was not necessarily conducive to me, but he was a tough guy, and throughout the history, we had certain other managers. At one time, William F. Buckley, believe it or not, who was studying with Rosalind Turek on the harpsichord. He owned the station, and he sold us, and we went down the drain. And it was only because of the Supreme Court and some woman who became an important judge, as you know, her who I'm talking about, Kristen Booth Glenn. She saved us in the most dramatic way. There were so many people that they couldn't bear that this station went because it was so much better than QXR, because I had made it so, and that was the story. Yeah.
Let me just say that when David began there, I believe they had a library of 1,500, mostly Baroque, Baroque records. And when he, at its height, what did they have? 20,000? You had 20,000, 25,000?
Oh, yes. And it was better than that because I understood that a record is not just a record, as our record has, what, 20 composers on one album. So everything was cataloged down even to 14 seconds. And there were pieces at 14 seconds, 15 seconds. So I could see a whole range. This is pre-computer days. And of course I made it as a commercial station. They would all bring the clients in to see David Dubal suffering over the Great Wall of Sorrow. And I played that game very well. And it also kept my job because they had no idea of what I was doing. And without me, it would just close down. One day, it was John Cage's anniversary concert, and I put it on at 7 o'clock. That was very daring. And this same manager called the announcer, Lucien Ricard, and he said, get the thing off. I mean, we're having bad transmission problems. And Lucien said, no, this is the birthday of John Cage. And he said, I didn't know that. Okay.
So David, what your programs in the radio station were sort of what you taught at Juilliard, and basically you had, although the only difference, you had live performances. One thing that always mesmerized me is you would bring those young pianists, most of them Juilliard or Manhattan School of Music, and they would come and perform, and you just lecture on, without, I would say, without even knowing what they were going to play, but you know it all, and just came and talk about the composer, the piece itself. And what came, was that a sort of from the radio station to Juilliard, or Juilliard to the radio station? How did that happen?
I don't know. I just, loved music. And I want to say also that, we're talking about me and my virtuosity with the knowledge. But, if Stanley doesn't know as much as I do, I would really doubt that, because for 40 years, we've been talking on the phone about every pianist, and there's not even just 5 days ago, he said, David, I can't tell you. I just heard. He doesn't say, do you agree or anything like that. He knows exactly what he hears and wants. And he said, you hear that Mozart concerto or whatever it was with Pariah? And I said, yeah, Pariah is really rising a lot in your favor. Things like, so what we talk about is piano. Once there was someone walking on the street with us, and this woman listening to us, and we were talking fervently and passionately about Julius Cashin. And she looks at Stanley, she said, when you two are together, are you always like this? And Stanley said, not only are we like this, we've said the same exact thing for 22 years.
Yes, I'm very fortunate to have had him as a piano teacher, because he didn't measure his words. And at the same time, he was always very sincere, which I really appreciate. But my experience with Stanley was when I came to audition my first lesson. He was pacing the studio when he had a really bushy hair, and he was shaking and scratching his head and saying the F word, the S word. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. This is horrible. I'm playing horribly. And I remember after I finished, he came and kissed the top of my head and said, very good, honey.
Well, one of the things I know, and as you must know, he's a wonderful teacher.
Yes.
And he transmits this knowledge with with true verbal excitement, because he loves the instrument as we do. The instrument is an all-encompassing thing in the lives of anyone that ever aspires to being in any way a good pianist. I don't even say a master. But, I was speaking to James Stream recently, and we were talking about competitions and so forth. And he said, God, I wish that Stanley had entered competitions, and it was so anti-Stanley. But he said, this guy is the greatest unknown pianist in the United States by far, and he knows that just through the recordings. But he's done great job for his colleague Luigi Zaninelli. And why don't you speak about Luigi, because we both know him, and he's 89 years old and in such great shape. I mean, what a guy.
Yeah. Let me just introduce a little bit, and it's three infinitives for piano. It's here in the Piano in America, and it's performed by Stanley Waldoff. I would encourage everybody to also purchase the CDs, because they are also available online via Amazon. And as always, I've heard the CDs, I don't know how many times, and I keep repeating them, and I always find something wonderful, new. So Stanley, I will let you talk about Luigi, who is a wonderful musician.
He really is, and he's a wonderful jazz player too. I don't know anything about jazz, but I must say that everybody who hears him play jazz says it's unbelievably wonderful. Mm-hmm. So he graduated from the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. He studied with Giancarlo Menotti, and he went to Italy during his time at Curtis. They sent people abroad to study, and he studied with I forget Scalera.
Scalera. Doesn't even matter. What matters about him was that he wrote a major piano work called Fantasma, right?
Yes, for the left hand alone, the right hand alone, and then both together. And I recorded it for someone, and I'm sorry, I don't remember at the moment.
Spectrum, I think it was Spectrum.
Spectrum, maybe.
Yes.
And also, he did a piece for piano and band, symphonic winds, I should say, better than band.
You know, Stanley and I had. Also, it was a remarkable moment in our lives that we had a career as pianists on the stage all over the United States, at least 40 states in a few years. We were under the management of Colston Lee, the man who took care of Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor, lived in the White House. Anyway, he was quite a guy, and he liked us very much. And Stanley said, well, don't you want to hear us play? He said, oh, no. He said, if I heard you play, then maybe I wouldn't be able to sell you. So all I know is that in no time, we were traveling together, and it was the days when, you know, they had the wonderful people that would get you there exact. So he'd come from Mississippi, I'd come from New York, and we would meet like that almost every time. And we then played at all the women's clubs in the junior leagues, and we had a remarkable time.
Did you just play, or did you also lecture?
No, we played. Right? It was the Piano in America with the script, and then we played the pieces. And you know, Stanley is a pianist that, you know, is so perfect. I would slosh through it. I would this, I would that. I was pretty busy with a lot of things, and practicing. Even when I practiced, I would miss so many notes. So I said, oh, God, Stanley, this is terrible. And he said, oh, come on, it's great. You know, and anyway, they never heard the piece. But they did. All these old women knew Anton Rubinstein's romance, and they'd come up and they say, oh, we know this piece. Or once in Wayne, Indiana, or Fort something in Indiana, a lady comes up to me and said, do you know that De Pachman, the great pianist, De Pachman played on this piano? It was called a Packard piano. And, you know, they made cars, they made pianos, and so forth. But I said, yes. And she said, you know who De Pachman was? I said, oh, one of the great pianists of all time. Oh, you never knew what you would get. And Stanley was always like a matinee idol to them. I remember the woman in Lexington, Kentucky, he played something that you would not even think that you would, you know, sigh but she went out of her mind. She just went crazy. So we had to absolutely, just to get rid of her, we had to get out of that town. You remember?
Mm-hmm.
And she was going to follow him for the rest of his life. There's no doubt about it. And
once in a while, I would come to my lessons, and he would be sitting and just playing, and I would knock on the door. I would wait outside and listen, and then sometimes I would knock on the door, and I said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you can keep playing." And I would just sit and enjoy. "Oh, no, honey, I'm just trying to see if I can remember." Flowers, and that's how he was, and that's how he is.
Well, I remember our great friend Elliot Prescott, who unfortunately died, and we were like the Three Musketeers at Juilliard. And he said to me, he says, "You have to watch Stanley practice, because he's taught me so much just by me watching him, because he doesn't learn anything without memorizing it." And that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
And I always try to do that, but I can't. And yet, Stanley has learned the 32 sonatas.
Yes.
Beethoven, all of Chopin. Had no care to play it for anyone, just does it. Keeps at it. So.
And that was after his retirement. Just for the fun of it.
Yeah. Well, it's not fun. It's a thing you have to do. You want to in this world to be very serious, not just communicate with an audience who can be just silly and, as Horwood said, who cares about the audience? There's only 5 in there that know what I'm doing anyway. No, but Stanley understood, and as I do too, I practice today, you want to get closer and closer to these great composers that you have loved. These people are your companions. They're more than friends. They are spiritual energies that are in the air. And when you're giving to them, you are giving to yourself on the highest level. You may not play it on the highest level, but you have had a wonderful time with it that is incomparable. So I think that was the reason he did it, not because only maybe Teresa he would play it for. And I would say to him, "Well, I could get you a recording to do. Or why don't you come to New York, play it for Mike?" No, he didn't care about that. Just cared about the process of learning, which is absolutely the thing to care about.
Yeah, let me just say this about David. I can call him up and say, "Do you know the recording of, let's say, Rubinstein playing the second Chopin sonata? 28 minutes, 17 seconds, boy."
Yeah.
As opposed to this one who plays it in 27 minutes and 36 seconds.
Yeah.
I just would like to say to the audience, because there are people from all over the world already. I see the messages in Spanish and Portuguese and in English, that you are allowed to ask questions, and I'll be happy to translate that to David and Stanley. And we're going to get into a subject that I want you guys to be sincere as you are, and talk to me about what we have right now in terms of pianism, and the pianists that we are now being successful versus the ones that you heard live and learned from. And I will just let you guys talk about what's going on right now.
Well, let me begin by saying something that I believe we used in our lectures, and that has to do with our second president, John Adams, who said something like, if this wasn't exact words, this was his intent. He said, "I must be interested in politics and war so that my children can pursue business and finance, so that their children can be artists." That was his ideal, a revolutionary man who became president of the United States. And I'm afraid in today's world, that's not possible any longer, because people no longer revere the instrument as David and I do, and as you do. And it seems to be something of a bygone era. What do you feel, David?
Well, of course, and that was a phrase that we used in the piano in America. It was peppered with many, many pieces of information, and then we would go play the piano, you know, from the first piano piece composed in America to the to something new, and there were 20 pieces, and I would say that we played everywhere with such success, but they were all women's clubs. Now, these women had all played themselves. They all had been part of that age where there was a piano in every home. Now, you couldn't find a women's club or a junior league. Sometimes we had in Detroit 2,500 people at 10 o'clock in the morning. And you couldn't find the audience any longer because it's over. Now, that's one of the things that we have to confront. I've told my students there's activism on all levels in this society now, and you have to be activists yourself, or you will have no possible career eventually, especially with playing only 3 Beethoven sonatas and that's it. So it's a fight to the end now, and it's a fight in America to even know that there's a piano series anywhere, or there's like, if we didn't have China, let's say, we wouldn't have a person buying a piano in America. Almost all the Steinways that are bought are now bought by foreign agencies, or especially Japanese and especially Chinese. So my book, Reflections of the Keyboard, it just sold out in no time, as I said, in Shanghai. However, is there any hope here? No, there's no hope, because we are so diversified that we hate everything. Classical music, great art, it's going to go, and that is the truth. We can't play games with something so important. You talked about Adams. I'll say Jefferson loved the piano so much, he brought the first piano to America from Frankfurt. When Steinway starts making pianos that are inferior, what are we going to do? We have a piano literature that is the greatest literature of all literatures in the world and doesn't need translation. And so what are we going to do? We can't just say, hey, okay, we have 400,000 Chinese pianists trying to get into Juilliard. What are they trying to do? All they're trying to do is imitate some recording they've heard, and they sit there for hour after hour and they practice and they play. And of course, if you do that, you're going to hit the right notes eventually, but where is the soul? And now that doesn't mean that they're not musical. They are, but they haven't been given by their teachers, by their parents, any culture at all. No reading. They don't know anything about the music of their own country. They don't care. And so the competition, and you have this desire to go out and show yourself off. You know, Busoni, who did everything only for itself, he said, people study music, nothing, 3-4 pieces just to show themselves off. They don't care. And that's not something brand new. It's always been inherent in the mediocrity that exists in every art. So,
let me tell you a funny story of one of our concerts. We played a concert for a large number of women who were wives of Pentagon officials in Washington, D.C.
Oh my God, yes.
And one of the woman who was the hostess, I presume that she knew as much about the military as her husband. And so I was asking her about weapon systems, a passion of mine, about airplanes and, you know, this sort of thing. And she said, you know, you should really talk to my husband. And I said, who's your husband? And she said, at the moment, he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States. His name was David Jones. I'll never forget this. I looked,
But that,
so embarrassed.
Stan, that same concert, it's because you got in a little late. You didn't even know that you were playing at the Pentagon that day.
Right.
And that's where we were playing, in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And so we were playing for all the women of the wives of the Joint Chief of Staff. And it was maybe a little bit after Carter became president. And they hated Carter. You know, they were military girls. And one of them said, you know, he's president now for 200 days. He's never even come to visit the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So later on, we found out this was the least warlike president we've ever had.
By the way, I began the concert by playing the Star Spangled Banner that Luigi had arranged for me. And they all, from the first they all stood up en masse. I mean, it was like nothing you've ever seen. They just stood up, you know, with their hands across their heart, and it was quite wonderful, actually. They were all wonderful to us.
Oh, they were wonderful. All these be it the great Texas oil women of that time to every audience. I mean, we had, like, we were stars at the end. You know, I mean, they just couldn't get enough of us. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean that. What I wanted to ask the two of you, I think David already hit the point, is if there's any pianist that is want to have a career and they are practicing, doing everything. Of course, as you said, it's not all, and it's not. But what are the advices? Because those are the things that sometimes you don't get from a teacher. You get from the world. And I would like to hear the advice that both of you have to say.
Well, there's no more careers, really. Not careers as we knew them in the past. No Horowitz, no Rubinstein. They just don't exist anymore. There are a few pianists, talking about the piano now, there are a few pianists that have what we consider major careers, but nothing like the stars of the past. And if that's your objective, is to have a career, well, you better find another career, because, as I said, they just don't exist anymore. What you should do is, get yourself a university job, learn to play within that atmosphere. And if anything else occurs, it will probably be under the term luck, because there are many, many pianists who play wonderfully that no one's ever heard of. I mean, my God, we went to school with 10, 20 pianists you've never heard of, who were just marvelous.
More greater than anyone that we have playing today,
Yeah.
Never heard of them, never will.
Never will. But they were there. And anyway, so David, what do you think?
Well, I think that your advice is certainly good, but it's conventional, because we don't even have the university positions anymore. When I grew up, Wim Muller, my teacher at Ohio State when I was there for a little while, he all he had was a master's degree. He didn't have to have any doctorate. If you were good and you came from Juilliard, you just got the job. And so when I studied with him, I saw that, sure, he's better than anyone. And I loved having him teach. And he said, you have to get out of Columbus, Ohio. You have to go to Juilliard. And so without that, I had a big thing to think about, because I had a scholarship in painting there. And this guy was also very good. So who knows? But the point is that there are not any jobs easily gotten. Rosangela, it's wonderful that you're teaching, and you deserve all that you can get. You're the great Brazilian composer Guarnari. You have recorded him. I've even played it on my radio show. Things like that. We do the bits and pieces we can, Stanley. That's the thing to do. If it's learn the piece for itself, don't expect money. get the idea of the career out of your mind. Careers are for doctors, and they don't even want to be doctors anymore because of the bureaucracy. We're so over-organized that, you know, a pianist or a violinist would find it hard to get any time even to work well. You need what Horowitz had. If he wanted to take off, no matter what, because he was neurotic or because he was tired or whatever it be, he would take 5 years, he would take 3 years, and he would take 12 years. And, well, they didn't think of life in the same way as a competitive, endless, bloody sport. And got to get out of that. If you don't love music, please. And if you don't love the piano, a much easier instrument, beautiful sound, study the clarinet. And you'll still have very, very hard time getting a position in an orchestra. So what is my idea? I would say, if you really want a generation later on than us, just as the ecologists have to think now of not just ourselves, but the future, and we just don't understand that we had no future. We have no what do you call it? Desire to have great music. We don't know how to sit. We have basically hostility to greatness because everything has to be put down into a bowl and chopped into the sameness. And so if you are individual, you're going to have a hard time. And that's the truth. Every generation has had a hard time, but we are having the hardest time of all time because we're marginalized to absolute nothingness. And you said, tell the truth. This is the truth. And it has nothing to do with I'm depressed, because you have to do what you can. Am I right, Stan?
Absolutely.
Well,
and you're right about college, and you're right about people that chase what they think they want, find out it's not what they want when they get a little of it. So, I mean, being by yourself and touring is not the world's greatest profession. I know that.
May I? I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I think people would like to also know the stories of the fear that Horowitz had about going on stage, you know, and that he was always giving concerts in the afternoon because if it was too late, he probably would cancel that. And you spend evenings with him, David, and you can pretty much tell or confirm if it's a myth or if it's true that he feared the stage.
Oh, yes, of course he feared. He would say to Oscar Levant, you don't know how to cancel concerts very well. You've got to learn how to do it, and you'll be a much happier man. It was a real hatred in a sense. Just as Glenn Gould hated the concert stage, he said it was a criminal action. Actually, the audience were waiting for you to like a Roman gladiator. Horowitz had no faith really in a great public. He told me that there will be no recitals within 50 years. After reading we were together and he looked at an ad and he said, look at the ad, look at Michael Jackson, really, these are not artists, these are entertainers. Let them have their niche. Don't let these people get away. Words do matter. We hear this all the time. Don't let them get away with talking about that they are artists. They are entertainers. They could be very good. They could be very bad. They can make a lot of money. This has nothing to do with art. Art is something that you don't cross over with and you don't play games with. For art will hit you back in the face if you don't give it everything.
Even Chopin was one of the first to have the problem with audiences. As David wrote in the book, he was a man whose entire reputation was built on 30 concerts in his whole life.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand audiences. He couldn't stand their eyes looking at him. He couldn't stand the way they peered at whatever he did. So it goes back to, Chopin died in 1849. So it goes back to the 1830s when he was playing the book.
It is very it's very difficult to be. I call being naked in front of people, because after you are, you spend hours and hours trying to understand the concept of the music, and then all of a sudden you have a bad day, or some days you have a good day, and you just you have to deal with the deception, as well as you have to deal with the good days, which is always very rewarding. And it's waking up the next day and doing all over again. And I always tell students all the time, treat the music as if you don't know, because that's when you start learning. You have to learn every day, and you have to treat the music with respect. Don't just pretend that you know it. And that's a concept that you have to carry for your entire life.
Well, one piece is a process of a lifetime.
Yes.
And it's important. It's what we're really all about as humans, this creative potential. And this must begin only with you and your heart. Don't expect society, especially today, to give you anything back. Remember, you don't deserve money because you decide to be an artist. If that's what you're in, become a hedge funder or one of the stuff that they do. I don't know what they do. I have no interest. But money is not what it's for. I remember with Horowitz once, he said, they think I care about money. Of course I don't care about money. And I said, well, of course you don't. And then he said, oh, that reminds me, I have to cash a check. And he said, would you go over there to the drawer and find this check for me from the Maisel brothers? They happened to make the documentary, The Last Romantic, or something, some ridiculous title like that. And so I went in there, and there was this and that checks. And one of them was for like $250,000. And I said, Maestro, what are you doing? This check is 4 months old. 5, don't you put it away? Oh, yes, I must do that, or something like that. He couldn't care less. What was interesting to him was the senses. He loved perfume, to smell something he loved. And he put it on his handkerchief. And sometimes we would take out our handkerchiefs. And I said, what is that? And he would tell me, oh, that's that. And I would say, oh, that's Flores from London. I just got this from London. Those things that would excite you about life. And they're personal. We never know what will excite anyone. And sometimes it's to be kept to yourself only. Life is not some public transaction of playing a few pieces and sitting at a piano. Rachmaninoff said, yeah, 90% of talent is sitting on your ass.
Well, I just cannot thank you all for being here with me. It feels like an hour just passed by in 1 minute. And I just want to say that I would love to do this again and again, just because of all that you know. And we didn't even touch about Nadas. I would love to hear from Stanley talking about him. He was one of the greatest pianists. And I would like also to hear about Horowitz and Claudio Rao. I grew up in Brazil, where we adored Claudio Rao, because he was one that was so careful. Anyway, we can talk about them all the time.
Oh, yeah. Horowitz was a central event of my life. Only 2 days ago did I do a 3-hour interview. This guy has been dead over 25 years, and he follows me around. I just did an interview of about 3 hours for some German radio from Berlin.
I would love to probably get each of you in different programs, so we can talk about specific pianists that you know, and talk about the music and the composers, and we can play some music and talk about it. But I remember clearly that program that you guys were talking about, the comparative analysis of Chopin works, and while some had some wrong notes, still was the best one. Cortot was one of them, Alfred Cortot. So what makes music? And I had lunch with Nelson Freire in Brazil in 2019.
Sure. Oh, yes.
And then we were sitting side by side, and he's very quiet, and he kind of looked at me and said, well, what music is not what happens with the notes, it's in between the notes.
Yeah.
So And that type of conversation we can have individually, so we can focus in different composers. If you permit, I would love to just let's plan this. I will call both of you and schedule other interviews that I would love to hear from, composers or pianists that you had experience with.
Yeah, we would like to thank you also for having had us on together. It brings back a lot of wonderful memories. And also, I would say from a personal point of view, that Rosangela was one of the best students I ever had. And
this is the first time you're saying that. You always were really mean to me.
yeah.
That's the part of the old school where, you could scream at everyone, you could hit them in the face, but it doesn't matter. They were the great teachers. And today, if they even by mistake touch your fifth finger to show you something, they'll put you down into the principal's office, so to speak, and you'll be in jail tomorrow.
And you cannot even say it's not good because they will sue you. But I love both of you.
Careful, by the way, that they are taking away. We didn't discuss what teaching means. We've talked about teaching, and they are taking away this great art of teaching, of which I love with a passion. And by the way, I want to say one thing to show you what Stanley has said many, many things to me that I've loved, because he's incredibly intelligent, and we would not have our relationship this long without it. And when The Art of the Piano came out, and I don't remember if you remember this, but I will never forget it, the book The Art of the Piano, and he said, your writing on Lipati is almost even better than his playing. And I never forgot that. I don't know if you remember that, but I wanted to give you credit for that.
I want to thank both of you. I love you both. I admire you both. You are one of the greatest. And I feel humbled that you guys accept my invitation. I just saw the chat here. Next month, I'm going to interview Chris Boardman. He is a movie screen composer, wrote too many movies of music for Steven Spielberg and Shirley MacLaine. And so we're going to interview him. But after that, I would like to invite you all for coming back individually, just so we can talk one by one. I just love seeing the interaction between the two of you.
Well, we'll do it again together, too.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
Of course.
We have subject to talk about the entire life, and I would love that. You guys are going to stay in, and I'm going to pass my word to Andrea from Brazil. Take care.
Thank you, Andrea, also. She was marvelous to us.
Yes, she is. She's a wonderful musician and a wonderful friend. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Stay in. We're going to go back to you guys, but she's going to now close the program. Thank you very much, all. Bye-bye.
I don't have words to say thank you, David Dubal and Stanley Waldoff. What's a fantastic discussion. Was wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muito obrigada a todos que estiveram conosco neste final de tarde de domingo. Nós ouvimos uma belíssima discussão de dois grandes músicos mundiais. Esse é um projeto da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas e Reitoria Digital da Universidade Federal de Goiás, juntamente com a Mississippi State University. Nós temos o apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, do Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estudos Musicais da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, do Centro de Estudos Brasileiros da UFG, da Rádio Brasil Central e da Rádio Universitária. Além de mim, fazem parte desse projeto a Maria Caroline Porto, Sérgio de Paiva, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yazbek Seba, abrindo esse projeto, nesse convênio hoje com a Mississippi State University, e o Wesley de Menezes. Muito obrigada a todos vocês que estiveram conosco. Esse programa continuará com o horário habitual dele, todas as sextas-feiras, às 17 horas. Muito obrigada a todos vocês e até a próxima sexta-feira.